we've seen a lot of iconic internet titans die out throughout the years. It's a sad fact that many of the net's most popular and well-loved websites and games have shut down or become obsolete over time, from Yahoo Answers to MySpace to AOL to Club Penguin to countless MMOs, flash games and forums that have been lost to the sands of time. The death of a website is usually the result of a slow decline in popularity, a lack of funds, or features becoming obsolete over time. DeviantArt, on the other hand, is unique. While there were many contributing factors to its downfall, there was one factor, one single moment in time that you can pinpoint as the entire catalyst for the site's total fall from grace. The day that DeviantArt died was a Wednesday. It was March the 6th of 2019, and it's the day that a brand new feature called Eclipse was introduced to the site. But what made Eclipse so abysmally awful as to drive away all of DeviantArt's users? What are these other contributing factors that led to its downfall? Why the hell is DeviantArt tied up in an AI art lawsuit right now? And how did the site go from an iconic and hugely popular staple of the internet to a relic of the past, forgotten by most and hated by many? Well, today let's cover the story of DeviantArt, its rise to popularity, and its subsequent fall from grace. Before we get into all of that, I just want to give a huge thank you to 2Dots for sponsoring this video. 2Dots is a super chill and relaxing game that you can download for free on iOS and Android. With super fun and honestly really calming gameplay where you match different colored dots to earn high scores within a certain number of moves, it's the perfect way to decompress and take a break. It's still a great challenge though, with tons of levels of varying difficulty to provide a nice little sense of achievement as you progress. The graphics are minimalist and actually really adorable, the music is lovely, and the vibe is truly immaculate. Plus there are weekly events like the scavenger hunt where you have to find hidden items on a map, or the treasure hunt where you need to complete 7 special levels to unlock unique rewards. Honestly, 2Dots is kind of my favorite thing right now. It's simple and relaxing, yet pretty challenging and complex. The music is super vibey, and you know, sometimes it's fun to just sit down, take a breath, decompress, and match some dots. Spoiler alert, there are more than 2 dots though, just so you know. Just want you to be informed going in. Genuinely though, it's a super fun, relaxing, calming, and enjoyable experience. I've honestly been having a blast playing it, so I highly recommend checking it out. Download 2Dots for free today using the link in the description below, or scan the QR code up on the screen here. 2Dots is a truly fun game, so definitely check it out. Thank you so much to 2Dots for sponsoring this video, and now let's get back into the rise and fall of DeviantArt. The story of DeviantArt started all the way back in 1997 when, at age 18, Angelo Sotira, known online as Spyed, founded a file sharing site called Dimension Music, later shortened to just D Music. The site was one of many early file sharing sites where users could distribute and download MP3s off the net, and it saw huge success, quickly becoming one of the top MP3 sites on the internet with tens of thousands of visitors each day. This was back during a time when MP3s and digital downloads were like a new and exciting development compared to burning CDs and cassettes or buying physical copies, and the music industry was vehemently against it. However, as we know today, digital downloads and streaming music on sites like YouTube and Spotify and Apple Music are hugely popular and basically the industry standard, so early adopters who got in on the ground floor before even the music industry did were hugely successful. A few years later, in 1999, D Music was acquired by Michael Ovitz, former president of Disney, described as a quote-unquote very powerful Hollywood super agent, and his company called Lynx Technology Group. Sotira went to work with Ovitz straight out of high school and was allowed to continue running D Music on behalf of Lynx. During this time, D Music would go from a single MP3 site to a whole network of different websites hosted under the D Music network. One of these sites was Winamp Facelift, an extensive database of skins for the media player application Winamp. For those who might be a little lost, because the internet is very different now than it was in the late 90s, skins were basically packages that you could download to make applications on your PC have custom appearances. One of the most popular skinnable applications back then was Winamp, a Windows media player, and Winamp Facelift was the first site to collate tons of different downloadable skins. This is relevant because the D Music network, again operating under the watchful eye of Lynx Technology Group, acquired a company called Cybertropics run by a man called Scott Jarkoff, known online simply as Jark. Jarkoff approached Sotira with the idea of creating a new website run off the D Music platform for artists and designers to share their skins, and with his extensive history working with skinning websites, he was pretty open to the idea. Matthew Stevens, known as Mateo, was brought on as a third co-founder early in the project's development to help manage the site, and it was his eventual suggestion to push it in a more general art-based direction instead of solely focusing on skins that made DeviantArt what it is today. Without that push, it likely would have become just another forgotten Winamp skinning site rather than the innovative art sharing platform that it eventually became. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves, because just as DeviantArt was getting started, the internet bubble burst. See, the reason that a teenage Angelo Sotero was able to get a job where he was creating and acquiring and managing a bunch of up-and-coming websites supported by a large, powerful company right out of high school was because of the dot-com bubble. Back in the 90s, as the internet rose to prominence, there was a huge boom in internet-based startups and companies, which also saw huge growth as more and more people started using the net. People were launching websites and founding companies left, right, and center, and since there were so many niches to be filled and so much money to be made, everyone was hopping on board. That is, until the bubble burst, everyone lost all their money, and tons of startups and websites had to shut down due to bankruptcy. RIP. It was rough to say the least, and with DeviantArt still being very new and not really bringing in any profit, Link's technology group made it very clear that it was next up on the chopping block. Angelo Sotero shifted his attention away from the site and back towards D-Music, since it was actually making a decent amount of money, and he wanted to try and salvage at least one of his sites since bankruptcy was a very large looming threat. To make things even worse, this is when DeviantArt got itself into some legal trouble. In a journal recounting the development and early years of the site, Sotero refuses to actually elaborate on what the legal issues were, but writes vaguely, quote, "Skipping over the details that are almost irrelevant, due to this issue I was directly instructed to shut DeviantArt down, and rightfully so, because not only was there a serious legal blunder that had been made, which has since been corrected, but DeviantArt was still very young, so it needed quite a bit of investment and time in order to begin cash flowing positive. The bubble had burst, and regardless of how fantastic I knew DeviantArt could be, it certainly did sound like a very dot-bomby idea to anyone not as close to the project as I was." Thankfully, eventually Sotero was able to patch up the legal issues, allowing him to sell off D-Music and find some partners to buy DeviantArt with. Now, without links breathing down their necks, the site was saved, and though still on pretty shaky ground after the economic crash and the subsequent legal issues, things were looking up. After a pretty shaky start and a concerning period of instability, DeviantArt began to find its footing. Beyond being a company or an investment or a business with profit margins, it was a genuinely revolutionary website. Art has existed on the internet since its very inception, but up until this point most art spaces online were BBSs, bulletin board systems, or niche forums, for example abnormous.com or breedart.org, both of which are now defunct. These were safe havens for artists to gather, share their art, and get inspiration, but they weren't exactly the best for actually sharing art since they were formatted like forums and you'd have to dig through different forum topics and subtopics and threads to actually find anything. Additionally, being a bit more underground, these communities tended to stay pretty small and insulated. As a side note though, I just love these old art websites. There's a certain nostalgia and charm to these like 90s and early 2000s internet communities that's kind of been lost to time. I just love the aesthetic, it's great. Anyway, the point is there was this huge teeming community of artists who were relegated to these smaller sites and had been waiting for something like DeviantArt to come along. A larger, more mainstream art site that functioned as a sort of gallery for artists to share their skins, music, drawings, paintings, digital art, designs, and more. No longer would users have to dig through BBSs or post their art on forum threads. Now there was a website specifically designed for artists where they could not only share their own creations but see the work of hundreds, even thousands of others. Another element that drew a lot of artists to the site was the sort of underground vibe that it had. True, the site probably wouldn't have been possible without the support of the ex-president of Disney and a bunch of other investors and high-class business dealings, but you know, the user base didn't have to know about that. To them, DeviantArt came off like any other scrappy, homegrown art website rather than a corporate business. The slightly edgier look, the casual way the staff interacted with users, and even the name DeviantArt contributed to this cool underground community vibe, so it's no surprise that many artists were drawn to it. In an interview from the podcast Future Tense, Angelo Sotero said, quote, "DeviantArt was about deviating your desktop. It was about wallpapers and what artists could do to make your computer look cool, and there were various ways that have become less popular now to do that. But the brand really connected with artists for whatever reason, and I think it connected because deviation is very much at the heart of creativity. Thinking about things differently, putting into your artwork something that makes it shine or something that's unique." As previously mentioned, DeviantArt was originally designed as a place to post skins and applications. When it first launched in 2000, the site site had a much simpler layout, mostly consisting of text and links with a basic logo and the slogan "Where art meets application." Most of the categories on the site were for things like application skins, wallpapers, themes, textures, interfaces, and fonts. In 2001, the site held a contest to design a mascot. A user called Switched won the contest with their design, birthing the iconic mascot that we know today. Fun fact, he has a name and his name is Fella, the more you know. Over the next decade, the website would constantly change and evolve as the team decided to branch out from skins and applications. More art-based categories were added, which began to dwarf skin and web design categories until they were a mere footnote, and the site layout became more image-based, showing users new and popular images rather than just listing new posts in a text format. Despite these frequent changes in website layout and design, one thing remained the same: the pale army green color, which had become an iconic, recognizable, and honestly beloved staple of the website. Well past their years of low user numbers and financial instability, by 2011, DeviantArt was a bona fide internet titan. Over 100 million deviations had been posted to the site, they had a printing business, membership, subscription, and online shop set up, and they had hosted their first DeviantArt Summit, essentially a giant convention held in a hangar with over 200 booths showcasing artwork of all kinds. It was also around this time that the website took on a more modern design, which I'm sure many of you will be familiar with, as well as their iconic green DA logo. By this point, skins and web design had been relegated to a single category. Meanwhile, there were sections for pretty much every and anything else art related, from digital art and photography to flash and animation to manga and anime and more. In 2011, they introduced DeviantArt groups, which deviants used for all kinds of purposes, from creating fan clubs for their favorite characters or shows, to collating bases and art references, to running in-depth roleplays and games, to selling adoptables, and much more. Points were also introduced as a premium currency for the site, which, as far as I can tell from my own experience, was pretty much exclusively used by 12-year-olds to pay other 12-year-olds like 30 cents for Sparkle Dog commissions. Over the next few years, the site would continue to launch new features and initiatives, including DeviantArt Miro, a drawing app, Stash, a file storage platform where you could upload and store images and writing, a creative grants program, a mobile app, and yet another iconic green logo, this time this little lion squiggle thing. Am I like a silly goose for still not knowing what this is meant to be? Because I gotta be real, I still kinda don't know what it's meant to be. Still iconic though. It's also worth noting here, because it is going to come into play later, that a huge draw of the site was its customizability. You could customize your profile with tons of different widgets and layouts and use HTML to jazz it up in all kinds of ways, from new colors and themes to pixelated banners and page dolls to buttons and galleries and so much more. It was an awesome way to keep the spirit of the original DeviantArt skinning community alive, and since the site was 99% made up of artists and creatives, they loved having that degree of control over the aesthetic look and layout of their page and gallery. In 2012, the site introduced an incredible feature called More Like This, which would allow users to infinitely browse images and explore artworks related to what they were already engaging with. From the announcement post, quote, "More Like This is not image recognition software. Instead, it looks at where an image exists on the DeviantArt social graph and finds deviations that are nearby. This means that members of the DeviantArt community help define the More Like This results. Explore the connections and insights of the DeviantArt community with every click." You might be wondering why this is relevant, and it's because all of the comments look like this. Wow, this is like a time capsule, except instead of a tin box of random knickknacks from the 90s, it's a taste of the DeviantArt people want back. Give it back. I like the old way better. The new way sucks. Give it back. Give it back. To whom it may concern, go fuck yourself. Eclipse is hot garbage. Change it back. Regards, all of us. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself, so just put a pin in that for now. More Like This was incredibly well received, and I think it's because it exemplified one of DeviantArt's biggest strengths, and that was community. It's hard to overstate just how important the site was for an entire generation of artists. It was a place to post art, yes, but more importantly, it was a place to consume art, to discover inspiring new artists, to explore new genres and mediums and art styles, to immerse yourself in artistic communities. Many kids and teens stumbled onto the site by accident trying to find art of their favorite anime character or creepypasta goober, and suddenly found themselves in this incredible community surrounded by art and welcomed in by people who had the same niche interests as them. As a young kid who myself was very into art, I can't express how important it was for me to just spend hours tumbling down DeviantArt rabbit holes, not just for my artistic growth, but for my growth as a person. I was obsessed with Ask blogs and would follow them religiously. I loved Warrior Cat's roleplay groups with their pixelated logos and banners and long list of very serious sounding roleplay rules. I always enjoyed seeing photography on the homepage. Sometimes it was cosplay or pinup photos, and other times it would just be a photo of a plushie being worked on, or a cup of tea, or a view out the window. It was a glimpse into these artists' everyday lives that was totally fascinating to me. I loved to spend hours scrolling through bases for Winx Club, Monster High, My Little Pony, and various anime, even though I had no idea how to use them. I loved Sparkle Dog and Furry OCs with their bizarre colors and insane attention to detail, and I was fascinated by the never-ending cycle of drama that artists seemed to go through as they argued and bickered with their followers and friends. It was a weird experience for a 10-year-old, but also a very formative one, and it really fueled my passion for art and other creative endeavors, and I'm far from the only one. There are countless ways that DeviantArt touched users from around the globe, from artists who stumbled upon the site and discovered a lifelong hobby, to weird wolf roleplay kids who finally felt seen and heard by a community that accepted them and shared their interests, to aspiring painters and designers and animators who got into the industry thanks to the connections they made on the site, to people who joined writing or roleplay groups and are still lifelong friends with the people they met there, to people who mastered their craft over many years and shared that journey with their followers, to the awestruck, art-obsessed kids who followed them and dreamed of one day drawing like them. Unfortunately, you've read the title of this video and you know that DeviantArt experienced a pretty brutal fall from grace, but it's still important to acknowledge how important the site is to internet history and how important it was to the millions of users across the globe that used it. As dramatic as it sounds, especially talking about a site that's mainly known for its Five Nights at Freddy's shipping art and poorly painted Mary Sue Sparkle Wolves, it genuinely touched countless lives and had a huge impact on the online art space. The golden years lasted, I'd say, from around the late 2000s to the early 2010s. After this, the site began to lose a bit of steam as the user base began maturing and either shelving their hobby or moving on to other more mainstream sites and social medias. Obviously, plenty of artists stayed since they had friends and groups and large repositories of art there, and they earnestly enjoyed using the site, but others just lost interest or grew out of it, which is pretty natural. I was gonna give an example of a site that I've grown out of, but I still play like Animal Jam and Girls Go Games, so yeah, I can't talk. Still, by all accounts, the website was still going strong with a dedicated loyal user base and new features being added frequently. Over a decade after its launch, DeviantArt was still an iconic internet staple used and loved by many. That is, until Eclipse. So Eclipse was kind of like a multi-stage disaster, like a cake with multiple layers, but every layer is pain and suffering. The first stage came in early 2017 when Wix, yes, the website creator Wix, acquired DeviantArt for $36 million. The reaction to this ranged from surprise and confusion to suspicion and hesitancy, which isn't really surprising whenever any big update is announced for any game or website or community. People tend to react badly because people don't like big sudden changes. But many of the problems that people had went beyond just change bad and actually raised some pretty interesting points. They questioned why Wix would want to acquire the art website in the first place, suggesting that they only wanted it so they could integrate it into their own website building platform as a sort of portfolio feature. Others brought up the fact that though it sounds like an astronomical amount of money, in context, $36 million is pretty low for a site like DeviantArt. Wow, that's my former employer. They were in a lot of financial trouble, so this is no surprise. They could have sold for a lot more than that years ago. That's it? Only $36 million? Guess the owner wants to retire. Yeah, especially when a few tech startups have raised over $1 billion without even having a product. Perhaps they aren't just profit driven. DA has always been about community rather than service. Since Wix acquired them, a lot might change now and not necessarily for the better. Little did Reddit user Anti1 know just how accurate their prediction would be and how soon it would come to fruition. Stage 2 came in early November of 2018 when DeviantArt released a promo site showcasing the new update for the site titled Eclipse. As we've covered, DeviantArt has changed a lot over the years and the site was updated on almost a yearly basis at some point, so it wasn't a huge shock when the announcement came that it was once again getting a new coat of paint and some new features. But what was a shock was how drastically Eclipse changed the site. Far from a simple redesign or update, it was almost unrecognizable in its new state. With a modern, minimalist layout, sleek black color scheme, and new quote-unquote enhanced browsing features, it was clearly a move to replicate ArtStation. Oh yeah, I guess we should talk about ArtStation. In 2014, the website ArtStation was launched, and in the following years it would rise to prominence as the premier industry portfolio showcase website. It was popular, yes, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a direct competitor since the websites filled two very different niches. DeviantArt was for artists of all skill levels and mediums, from kids using MS Paint to cosplay photographers honing their craft to professional concept artists and designers. ArtStation, on the the other hand, was more selective, more exclusive, primarily focusing on industry-level concept art and game design and providing a place for industry artists to showcase their work and make connections. The sites were very clearly made for different markets, but here DeviantArt was, in 2019, trying to replicate ArtStation's look, the more mature commercial vibe, and the affinity for AI art. But we'll get to that soon. Then came stage 3, the beta launch. A few weeks after the reveal, DeviantArt began rolling the beta version of Eclipse out to core members who provided feedback, bug reports, and commentary. This was essentially the calm before the storm because what was about to unfold next would effectively mark the beginning of the end. Phase 4. The launch. Eclipse was rolled out for all users on March 16th of 2019, and they very quickly found out that the aesthetics weren't the only issue, because Eclipse was hot garbage. Let's start with the loss of individuality, which sounds really deep and existential, but it basically just means they removed customization. Back in the 90s and 2000s, there were countless obscure web pages, forums, BBSs, and profiles in all shapes and sizes and colors and layouts, each a unique expression of their creator. DeviantArt, with its roots in the early skinning community, was the living embodiment of this, allowing users to express themselves however they wanted with HTML and CSS. It was one of the last remaining mainstream sites out there to allow total freedom with customization, with most other sites becoming extremely homogenized and offering everyone the same stock standard boring default profile. Personally, I hate how corporate looking the internet has become compared to the wonderfully weird and interesting forums and websites that you'd see in the 2000s. For example, just compare YouTube when it launched to how it looks now. I definitely feel like we're losing more of that unique creative spark, and that's why artists adored the profile feature and the creative freedom it gave them. So they were pretty upset when Eclipse launched and their profiles became homogenized stock standard boring pages with no way to customize them beyond a profile picture and a banner. The widget system had become far more restrictive, limiting the once infinite layout possibilities, and no longer could artists color their profiles with new themes and fonts. It was all so generic. Additionally, many users felt that their paid membership, known as Core, had become obsolete, as many brought it to use the premium profile customization features, which were now completely gone. Despite the growing trend of minimalist cookie-cutter profiles, DeviantArt had always remained as a wonderful relic of the internet when it was filled with eclectic, colorful, and sometimes weird HTML sites of all kinds. And for a lot of users, it hurt to see the site become just like any other with nothing special to set it apart anymore. But aesthetics were the least of users' concerns because the site was made worse and harder to use at best and actively broken at worst. Basic features were completely removed, such as centering text in journals, drag and drop for rearranging folders, favorites, and collections, custom gallery folder icons, a ton of profile widgets like the shoutbox, Twitter, forum, and critique widgets, daily page views and other statistics, DeviantArt Miro, birthday alerts, and of course plenty of customization options and HTML editing. Many more features were made cumbersome and annoying to use. The layout of the site was shuffled around so helpful quick access buttons and menus were hidden under random categories or nested within submenus of submenus. The dimensions were whack, so some features took up way too much space on the screen, like images in the personal gallery and the About Me widget, which by the way wasn't optional to have on your page anymore, you had to have it, while others were too narrow or strangely formatted. Username91 and Chiwowza, who posted a journal collating Eclipse's biggest issues, described the new site gallery as, quote, poorly spaced, images are jarringly huge, nonsensical organization. Additionally, Eclipse was kind of a buggy mess. The update clearly wasn't ready to launch, with buttons that wouldn't work, blurry and pixelated image quality, messages and notifications not showing up, and of course, unbearable lag. I can't believe how hideous the new interface is. It's full of blank space, it's taking forever to load, and I can't find how to see things like how many people have viewed this deviation that was super easy to find in the old version. What the hell is DeviantArt thinking making this unusable garbage mandatory? Late reply, lol, but as someone who's been on this hell site since 2012, I can't even describe how much they fucked up with Eclipse. I've been almost completely inactive since Eclipse launched, and it seems like most people are too, since most art I see, no matter how good it is, gets little traction, with most of them barely getting any favorites or comments. I just wish instead of completely changing everything, they'd changed up some things about the old site but mostly left it intact or let people toggle between the new and old site. Biggest flaw for me is the lack of customization. All profiles just look boring and lifeless now. I had an account for the better part of 5 years, and frankly it's so frustrating to see the vast majority ignored and having Eclipse forced down our throats. So I'm pretty much done, and they're essentially chasing away a large chunk of their user base out of ignorance and greed. As a final cherry on top of the miserable tear-soaked sandwich that was Eclipse, user engagement dropped sharply after a new endless scrolling recommendation system was implemented. With the old more like this system, users were constantly being shown a curated selection of art based on what they regularly engaged with, but with Eclipse, users suddenly found all of their curated recommendations gone, instead being served up random unrelated art from all corners of the site. The system was clearly broken, often showing the same images over and over, and users weren't being shown art from communities that they were actually a part of, and as such, engagement began plummeting. Many artists reported having their posts go from a couple hundred likes and or comments to almost zero. Whether this was due to the algorithm being scrambled, artists leaving in droves, or a combination of the two, it's hard to tell. While users were initially able to toggle between the old DeviantArt and the new Eclipse update, a year after the update launched, they completely removed that feature, forcing everyone to use Eclipse permanently. A mass exodus occurred as users began abandoning their accounts left, right, and center, sick of the unusable interface, the irrelevant and repetitive recommendations, and the fact that their engagement had dropped to almost nothing. It was a disastrous cycle. Less engagement meant more people leaving the website, and less people on the site meant less engagement. Users described coming back to the site post-Eclipse as coming into a ghost town, lacking the vibrant, bustling community and fun, wacky spark that it once had. But this was only the start of DeviantArt's sharp downward spiral into insanity, because their newfound enthusiasm for NFTs and AI would land them in hot water. And by hot water, I mean hot legal water. Ask any self-respecting artist what they think of NFTs, and they'll probably say something along the lines of non-fungible tokens, more like no fucking thanks. Artificial intelligence, more like fartificial and smellagence. It's true, artists really do say that. The feeling was not mutual though, as DeviantArt went full tech bro in its open embrace of both. This is not a video about the intricacies of AI art, so I won't bore you with a 5-hour lesson about what it is and why it's so terrible, but the TLDR is AI quote-unquote art is basically art/images that you can generate by inputting different combinations of words or prompts. In theory, it's a revolutionary tool and the next technological innovation in the art space, but in practice it's awful soulless garbage, which is highly unethical to boot. Not only has it been used to convincingly fake real images to spread misinformation, make NSFW content of real people without their consent, and is jeopardizing thousands of industry jobs with its proliferation, but AI generators can't actually just poof concepts into existence, they have to take bits and pieces from pre-existing images, and that means stealing hundreds of thousands of artworks and images from all across the internet without permission or consent from the creators. That's right, AI art is basically a mishmash of pre-existing stolen artwork, which is A, highly unethical, and B, very illegal, which is what got DeviantArt into so much trouble. But let's back up a little bit. The whole AI art discussion had been a pretty hot topic in the community for quite a while, and artists were waiting with bated breath to find out how DeviantArt would respond to it all. With sites like Newgrounds outright banning it, and artists on ArtStation performing large-scale protests against it, there was hope that DeviantArt would ban or at least enforce a tagging system for AI art. Needless to say, there was outcry when in November of 2022 the site first announced the launch of their own AI art tool called DreamUp, which would allow users to create generated images and post them to DeviantArt. Egregiously, the site automatically flagged everyone's art as being used for AI datasets, meaning that users would manually have to go to every single piece of art they posted to unflag it if they didn't want it to be stolen and used to train AI. When users tried to opt out of being involved in DreamUp, they found themselves having to fill out a quote-unquote DreamUp validation request, which is absolutely insane. We appreciate you letting us know that you're interested in opting out your username, real name, or other aliases from being used in prompts. Currently, we'll be approving this ability for free to artists who are most likely to have been sourced by Stable Diffusion, which, by the way, is the name of one of the main text-to-image generators used online today. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to it, it's going to come up again, it's important. In this first version of the opt-out process, we will only be considering accounts that follow best practices. In layman's terms, only popular/well-known artists who are likely to have been stolen from were able to opt out. And they weren't even really opting out here, they were expressing their interest in opting out. The language used was pretty concerning as well. The fact that they were, and I quote, currently approving this ability for free makes it sound like they had plans to potentially monetize the ability to opt out of your literal art being scraped for AI datasets. Extremely dystopian. Luke Plunkett of Kotaku writes in an article, quote, AI art is from the same grifting, dehumanizing tech first, ask questions later wheelhouse as crypto and NFTs, and you can see that at work in DeviantArt's system, which isn't here for the casual enjoyment of existing users but as a way to make money. DreamUp allows for a certain number of free prompts before users are locked out unless they're paid DeviantArt members. Obviously there was huge backlash about the extremely slimy way that they just flagged their entire site for use with AI datasets, which was not only extremely annoying for users to have to go back and unflag everything, but had horrifying implications for DeviantArt users who were no longer active on the site or worse, deceased. DeviantArt swiftly responded to the backlash with the backpedaling update that they had heard the community feedback and would now be automatically flagging everyone's art as not for use with AI. But this was far from the end of their troubles. A lawsuit on behalf of a group of plaintiff artists has been filed in the United States District Court for the Northern District of California against 3 companies, Stability AI, DeviantArt, and Midjourney, of the alleged infringement of the copyright of the artists and creation of so-called artificial intelligence art. So yeah, it turns out if you're a giant multi-million-dollar corporation, you can't just go around stealing copyrighted content to monetize. Who would have guessed? The class action lawsuit was filed in early January of 2023 by a group of artists who had their copyright infringed by the above listed companies. Now the interesting thing is that despite all being named and marketed as unique AI generators, all of them use the same artificial intelligence system called Stable Diffusion, which was, quote, trained on billions of copyrighted images contained in the Leon 5B dataset, which were downloaded and used without compensation or consent from the artists. DeviantArt is being accused of direct copyright infringement, vicarious copyright infringement related to forgeries, violations of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act or DMCA, violation of class members' rights of publicity, breach of contract related to the DeviantArt terms of service, and various violations of California's unfair competition laws. The lawsuit is basically seeking damages for the plaintiffs and is requesting an injunction against the AI generators until a system of compensation can be created, with comparisons drawn to the music industry and how streaming services have found a way to compensate musical artists. As far as I can tell from my own research at least, there haven't been any huge updates on this case since it first broke. Lawsuits and the whole court system in general tend to move painfully slow, so I don't imagine that we'll see any updates on this for a significant amount of time, but still, it's an extremely positive step in the right direction, and frankly, I hope the plaintiffs are successful. Frankly, I think AI art is soulless, brainless trash. It's an affront to art itself. It's enabling hack tech bros to call themselves artists for typing in a couple words, and I think it's ugly as hell. But the worst thing about it is that it's stealing artists' hard work, repackaging it and selling it to tech bros at a premium price, endangering their livelihood in the process. It's unbelievably ridiculously immoral, deceitful, and honestly disgusting, and it's such a bummer to see a site that historically has been so focused on the art community make such a huge blunder. There are clearly a lot of factors that have gone into DeviantArt's fall from grace, but the one thread that ties them all together is corporate greed. Once the site hit its peak in popularity and numbers began to decline, they rushed to sell it off while it still had some value. When a large company like Wix buys out a smaller, more community-based site like DeviantArt, it's not for the purpose of keeping that community spirit alive or rejuvenating the site. It's because they're going to use it as a new revenue stream. Wix only wanted DeviantArt for the monetization that they could get out of it, and that was pretty evident right off the bat when just a year after they brought it, they rolled out Eclipse. It seemed like a transparent attempt to give the site a more mature, respectable look, more on par with professional sites like ArtStation, which would be more appealing to advertisers and tech bro investors. And while I absolutely think the whole AI art thing was an extension of Wix's vision for the site, I also kinda think it probably would have happened either way. Angelo Sotera, the CEO of DeviantArt that we talked about earlier, is a very outspoken advocate for NFTs and AI art, seen here at NFT NYC meeting Gary Vee. On one hand, I hate it, but then on the other hand, it's like, this dude got a job in the tech industry at age 18 straight out of high school and was basically raised by insufferable tech bros, so am I surprised? No. Actually, Sotera stepped down from his role as CEO in late 2022, and the other co-founders appear to have distanced themselves from the site, at least judging by how inactive their accounts are. 4 days ago, as of me writing this script, the DeviantArt team made a post announcing that ads, which they had removed entirely in 2019, would be coming back to the site as they needed the money from the advertisements to keep everything up and running. They also added customization back to profiles in late 2022, but put the entirety of the customization features behind a paywall, and it still has a little bit more restrictions than there used to be, especially in terms of the widgets. So with an update that by all accounts ruined the website and drove away a large portion of the fan base, a large and very public copyright lawsuit, and now this pretty desperate post confirming that the site is not in a good place financially, things aren't looking too good for DeviantArt. It's extremely sad to me that such a wonderful, fun, weird art community with so many fond memories has become such a soulless corporate hellscape. This isn't a case of a couple bad decisions or a bad financial year or an accidental legal blunder. It's a pattern of being fully informed, having tons of feedback from your users, knowing the consequences, and still repeatedly making bad choices. It's unfortunate that the people running and managing DeviantArt now seem to just see it as an investment, a potential loss or gain, a bunch of numbers, instead of seeing it as the bustling, lively art community filled with history that it is. Countless people have grown up on this site. They have hundreds of images and pieces of writing from various stages of their life. They made friends and joined communities that helped to shape them into the person that they are today. To see all of that slowly fading away and replaced by a barely functioning blank slate of a website that looks like any other generic art portfolio website out there is honestly tragic and a pretty undignified end for a legendary website. Rest in peace, DeviantArt, you beautiful bastard. I hope the emo furry anime angels sing for you in heaven. Again, a huge thank you to 2dots for sponsoring the video. Download it for free using the link in the description below or scan the QR code up on the screen. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I really hope that you enjoyed that video. I've been wanting to cover DeviantArt for like a hot minute, but it's a pretty expansive topic. I feel like there are so many other facets of the site to cover, like the various trends and like the art challenges and all the kind of genres and weird niche communities that popped up, but I kind of wanted to just cover the more controversial aspect of the site potentially. It is genuinely sad to see the site fall from grace so hard. It was legendary once, but that day has passed clearly. But yeah, let me know if you maybe want to see another DeviantArt video in the future, or if you have any feedback on this one. Yeah, I want to know how you guys feel. Like, I know that there are lots of people that do genuinely still use the site, so I'm curious to know if you still use it, if you left, why, what your DeviantArt memories are. The more cursed, the better. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I really want to hear your thoughts, and yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye! A huge thank you to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon: Hazy, David Martinez, Oliver Brains, Caramel Coffee Bean, Blue Mayfeld, Electro Kitten, Katrina Lanks 5e Stuff, Fitzy, Michelle Olsen, Strawberries, Matt LRJ, A Riddle Wrapped in an Enigma Hidden by a Question Mark, SHSL Sunsun, Doug, Dana Homegardner, Charlie B, Simon, Ren Pendragon, Xavier Araujo, Helm Hamburger Hand, Dozo Blint, Sheriff Whiskey, The Fabulous Librarian, Astrium Vortex, Jesse Chisholm, First000, Grip Gunderson, and Joe Bradshaw. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. It means the world. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye!